Hello and welcome to A Peculiar Project. I'm Fritza Roberts and this is my new channel. I'll be talking about writing, craft, and reading and fiction in general on this channel. And I wanted to introduce myself first by talking about the things that I'm reading lately, just so you get an idea of how I think about fiction, how I think about storytelling, how I analyze the things that I read, including the projects for my editing clients, as well as just how I think about writing and stories in general. Um, if you are on Goodreads, I'd be happy to become friends there, and you will see my thoughts on all of the books that I read there. Some are more in depth, and some are less so, just depending on how much I have to say about a book. Um, and I do always disclose whether or not I know an author that I'm reading. So, one thing I really want to talk about is that I have been setting goals for reading using the Goodreads yearly goal setting. And I found that to be really fun, and it helped me to analyze and be a little more critical of what I read. I do think it's important to read a diverse array of fiction and nonfiction. And so I have made an effort recently to read um, more diverse authors, especially. Um, and just to like push my boundaries a little bit. I wanted to read one serious classic piece of literature per year. And so I have been doing that for a few years now. Also, within science fiction, it's really easy, within a lot of genres, I should say, it's really easy to get stuck in the trap of mostly reading or exclusively reading old white men. um, White American men or British. It's really easy to get stuck in that mode without thinking about it, especially if you aren't thinking about it. There's so many great books, and people will say, oh, you have to read this, you have to read that. And sure, you do want to be familiar with the classics of the genre that you write in, but you also need to know what else people are doing. What are the new authors doing? I think it's really important to know what is up and coming, what is cutting edge, what is award winning, and what is pushing the boundaries and maybe not reaching those critical levels of award winning or getting major reviews and huge readerships, but are again pushing the boundaries, really stretching the limitations or the expectations of a genre, not so much in redefining what science fiction or fantasy is, but in being more inclusive or changing ideas or broadening our ideas of what storytelling can encompass. I think major changes are happening in the world of fantasy, especially because we are seeing less reliance on the old notion of, say, high fantasy, where it's a fictional world that has sometimes elves and dwarves or just warring factions or peoples, but that you still rely on um, kingdoms, fiefdoms, kingship, royalty. Royalty, we'll talk more about that, but it is something that humanity has moved past. That people should be our leaders just because their parents were our leaders. I'm not saying our democracy currently is perfect, but that is an idea that humanity has embraced, that democracy is something we should move towards, and that maybe there's something after this that will be better or worse, but different. And so fantasy is a realm that is moving forward in ways of thinking of fantastical worlds that are vastly different from ours, that are not moving back in history, but moving sideways or forwards without being necessarily science fiction. To me, science fiction is just that. It's storytelling that involves an aspect of fictional science, whether it's near future, just speculation of what our current technology will be like in the next half century or less, or far future where we are speculating on where humanity will go overall with its technology, how vastly different technology can become. Um, but some sort of science or technology that is make believe. That to me is science fiction, and that's what I love to read. And I'm working on writing some of that as well. So I also every year read science fiction, fantasy, as I said, by diverse authors. And it's a goal of mine to read at least one book in each of these categories. I want to read something by a living author, try and stay in the camera, something by a living author, because I think it's important to support living authors. And those books I like to buy new. Um, I know they probably only get 6 cents or 30 cents royalties from every book purchase, but still making sure that I buy some new books from living authors. I also like to read foreign authors or books in translation to see what other people in the world are writing about and what they have to say, to experience different cultures and different thought modes. Um, I also like to read, as I said at the beginning, at least one strong classic literature book. And this year, what I'm reading is For Whom the Bell Tolls. Last year, I read Steinbeck's East of Eden. And the year before that, 2016, I read Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. So these are kind of major works that not everybody reads, but are often referenced as major classics of American literature. I have also read Russian classics and other classics. So but just sort of making an effort to make sure I read those. I am on a budget, of course. Making a living as a creative person doesn't give me a lot of spending money, but enough that I can read a lot. And so I do read a lot of used books, and a lot of books that are given to me. So it's kind of challenging to meet these goals because I don't always have a lot of money to go spending on new books. And to be honest, I have a lot of books on my shelves that I have yet to read. When I'm in a used bookstore, I buy a lot of books. I just can't resist. So there are enough books on my bookshelves to keep me going for several years, and yet I do buy more every year. Um, but I think going back to what I was saying about diversity and reading both international authors, living authors, people of color, people simply who have a background that's different from mine, both culturally, economically. I think that's really important. And the reason that's important is because the whole point of storytelling is for us to experience life through someone else's eyes. We enrich ourselves that way. We learn how other people think and feel and react to situations when we read fiction by people other than ourselves. Um, and I think that's important. I think it's important for two reasons. One is that it helps us grow as human beings. It helps us grow in ways that open our eyes to other cultures and other ways of seeing things. And that helps us to understand people who are vastly different from us. And that's important. We are entering into a global culture, and understanding each other and loving each other is important. It's crucial to the future of the human race, in my opinion. Um, Also, though, I think it helps us grow inside. It helping us understand ourselves. When we see the world and the future through other people's eyes, we see other ways that our own life can be. Um, I think very often we get stuck in ruts and we repeat behaviors that we don't necessarily like or thought patterns. And um, that's not necessarily healthy. We begin to change ourselves through changing our experiences, through changing our actions and our behaviors and our thoughts. And we can do that through fiction. You can do that through nonfiction too, of course. Self-help genre is burgeoning as always. But I do believe that we improve ourselves. Excuse me. I do believe that we improve ourselves by reading. And that self-improvement makes us better people, helps us to love ourselves. And that is our primary project in life. We come into the world, I believe, with some unspoken goal deep inside us that we may not be able to articulate. But a major part of that is learning to love ourselves. And through this love of ourselves, then we can better love other people and have a better appreciation of the environment that surrounds us, the planet that hosts us, um, and just a greater joy for living. And I really believe that fiction impacts that, helps us to grow that feeling of joy and love and happiness and appreciation. So that's big, that's huge. But that's also a major part of why I started my business as a peculiar project and started helping other authors make their stories into publishable books. Because I really believe we all have a story to tell, and everyone's story is important. It helps all of us to grow as human beings. So if you have a story that you want to tell it, write it, get it out there. It's important to share your story for yourself and for others. You're making the world a better place. I really do believe that. Um, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. I think that's a good introduction to how I think, why I read, why I write, why I edit. I hope that you all will join me on this YouTube adventure. I will talk more about the books that I'm reading, really breaking down what my thoughts are, what I like about them, why I chose that book. Um, and I'll talk about also what I'm currently writing as I'm working. And we'll also do some editing stuff. I'll look at some of the typical things that I find that need work in other people's writing and my own. Um, so some of this will be very craft driven, some of it will be really nitty gritty, some of it will be bigger, higher ideas about writing and the importance of literature. I hope you will join me, and happy reading, happy writing.